Hello and welcome for the very last time in 52 Weeks, 52 Scientists Season 1 for a very special, the biggest episode that we've ever had. So, ride along because today we are discussing Leonardo da Vinci and Season 1. And as I've promised in the last video, there's two bonus videos coming as well. One of them is going to be about the whole season, and another about what we're going to do in the future. But before all of that, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank all of you because you supported me, because we got so many subscribers, we crossed 1,000 views. It's all too magical to believe for me, but thank you. And I hope I can deliver you better content. So now that we're done with that, let's get started with today's video, which is all about Leonardo da Vinci. So, Leonardo da Vinci, what comes to your mind when you talk about this man? His artistic achievements, for example, are top of your head, I guess. And you won't be wrong. But he was a polymath, more than just a painter of a sort. He was a, according to Wikipedia, I quote, painter, draftsman, engineer, scientist, theorist, sculptor, architect. And he was part of the Renaissance. So let's discuss every part of his life in as much detail as I can give, and let's go through the motions. So let's start. He was born on the 15th of April 1452. And his death anniversary, which is on the 2nd of May, actually just happened 3 days ago. Yeah, 3 days ago. And I thought it was the best ending here. So, Leonardo da Vinci was properly named Leonardo Piero da Vinci, or Leonardo, son of Sir Piero from Vinci. He was born on the 15th of April, 1452, in or close to the Tuscan hill town of Vinci. Florence was about 20 miles away. He was born out of wedlock to Sir Piero da Vinci, a Florentine legal notary, and Caterina from the lower class. It remains uncertain where he was born. The traditional account from a local oral tradition recorded by historian Emmanuel Rapati says that he was born in Anciano. This was a hamlet that would have offered sufficient privacy because Da Vinci was an illegitimate child. That's fact, you should remember. It is still possible that he was born in Florence. His parents both married and separated separately the year after his birth. Caterina, who later appears in Leonardo's roads at only Caterina, is usually identified as Caterina Butti del Vaca, married the local artisan Antonio de Piero Butti del Vaca, or the quarrelsome one. Other theories have been also proposed, but that is all about his birth. We don't know much about his childhood, but he lived with his uncle, and he never had any formal education. He was educated in a few things. Basically, he was so artistically talented that his family thought, well, it's a waste of time and money to educate him in anything else. So they put him for a painting apprenticeship, and for all of the other subjects, he got sort of informal education. Later in life, he recorded his early memory known the Codex Atlanticus. He wrote that when he was writing on the flight of birds, he recalled this as an infant, where a kite came to his cradle and opened his mouth with its tail. And, some people think it's a fantasy, some people think it's actual memory. Anyways, let's get to the next part, Verocchio's workshop. So he moved to Florence, which was then part of the humanist thought and culture. He became a garzone, or a studio boy, in the workshop of Andrea de Verocchi. So he became an apprentice by the age of 17 and remained in training until 24. Other famous printers apprenticed with him include Relanzier, Perugini, Botticelli, and Lorenzo de Credi. He was exposed to a lot of technical skills. Just because he was an apprentice for a painter, that didn't mean that he wasn't trained in a lot of things. For example, he was exposed to drafting, chemistry, metallurgy, metalworking, plaster casting, leatherworking, mechanics, and woodwork, apart from drawing, painting, sculpting, modeling. So you could say he wasn't formally educated, but he had a education, as we can say. All right. So he was a contemporary of Botticelli, Ghalandia, and Perugini. They were all older, and he met them, right? So let's talk about him. Florence was ornamented with the works of artists such as Donatello's contemporaries Masaccio, whose frescoes were imbued with some realism and emotion, and Rubetse, whose gates of paradise, gleaming with gold leaf, displayed the art of some figure compositions. So, well, let's get to a story. So, Vasari tells a story of Leonardo as a very young man. A local peasant made himself a round shield, acquired that Sir Piero had it painted for him. Leonardo, inspired by the story of Medusa, responded with painting a monster spitting fire that was so terrifying that his father bought a different shield to give to the peasant. And so Leonardo said, Florentine art dealer for 100 ducats, who then sold it to the Duke of Milan. So basically, he got 100 ducats for it, and then the Duke of Milan bought it. It's quite hilarious, the story. And by 20, he had qualified as a master in the Guild of St. Louis, the Guild of Artists and Doctors of Medicine. Now, there's some reasons to why these were, but even after his father set him up, his attachment to Veracio was such that he continued to collaborate and live with him. His earliest known dated work is a 1473 pen and ink drawing of the Arno Valley. He was the first to suggest making the Arno River a navigable channel between Florence and Pisa. So, we're talking a lot about his art, right? And this is one of the episodes of 52 Weeks, 52 Scientists, which I'm spending a lot of time talking about the artistic career of the scientist. But if you look beyond that, we are also thinking about how he was thinking. That's thinking about thinking. And he had this idea to put a navigable channel between Florence and Pisa, which now I think of it is actually a brilliant idea. In 1476, he received an independent commission to paint an altarpiece for the chapel of St. Bernard's in a Palazzo Vecchio. An anonymous early biographer, who is known as Aronimo Gadiano, said that he was living in the Plaza San Marco, where a Neapolitanic Academy of Artists organized by Medici met. In March 1481, he had received another commission from the monks of San Donato in Skipetto for the adoration of the Magi. Then he went to offer his services to Duke of Milan Ludovico Sforza. Then he bought him with a silver string instrument, either a lute or lyre, in the form of horse's head. With Alberti, Leonardo visits the home of Medici, and through them came to know of the older humanist philosophers of whom Maslio Piccini, proponent of Neoplatonism, Cristoforo Langino, writer of commentaries on classical writings, and John Agrippoulos, the teacher of Greek and the translator of Aristotle, were the foremost. So you're starting to see this boy. We will call him a boy, right? He's 20, 25, and he's very influenced by Platonic studies, and his whole career is now not just about art. But before we get to all of it, he's now in Milan. So, he worked in Milan for 17 years. He was commissioned to paint the Virgin of Rocks for the confraternity of the Immaculate Conception and the Last Supper. So that's the most reproduced drawing ever for the monastery of the Santa Maria delle Grazie. I wouldn't try to translate that I was thinking of, but no. In the spring of 1485, Leonardo traveled to Hungary on behalf of Sforza to meet King Matthias Corvinus. It was commissioned by him to paint a Madonna. Different Madonna, okay? Leonardo was employed on many other projects of Sforza, including preparation of floats and pageants, and so many things. Let's talk a little bit more about his work with the Duke of Milan. So he painted the Sala delle Asse in Sforza Castle. Again, that is just until 1419. So now we get into the second Florentine period, and Then it's time for the 16th century. When Ludovico Sforza was overthrown by France, he fled Milan for Venice, accompanied by assistant Salai and his friend, the mathematician Luca Pacioli. In Venice, he was employed as a military architect and engineer, and his ideas was to devise methods to defend the city from naval attacks. So this was his first employment, where his work was mostly technical and less all about art. On his return to Florence, he and his household were guests of the Servite monks at the monastery of Sant'Isma Annunziata, and were provided with a workshop where, according to Vasari, Leonardo created the cartoon of the Virgin and Child with Saint John the Baptist, work that won such admiration that men and women, young and old, flocked to see as if they were going to a festival. This was one of his most popular works. Like, you talk about the Mona Lisa or the La Super, these were works that became popular after his death. This is one of the things, you could say this was where he went viral, I guess. This was his viral work, The Virgin and the Child with Saint John the Baptist. In Casina, he entered the service of Cesare Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI, acting as a military architect and engineer and traveling through Italy with his patron. He created a map of Cesare Borgia's stronghold, a town plan of Imola, in order to win his patronage. So he came back. So he was creating maps at this time, and then Leonardo had begun working on a portrait of Lisa del Giocondo on 18th October 1503. Now, if you don't know who's Lisa del Giocondo, she's the woman who's been portrayed in the Mona Lisa. In January 1504, he was part of a committee formed to recommend where Michelangelo's statue of David should be placed. He then spent 2 years again and painting a mural of the Battle of Anghiari for the Senora, which should mean the lady, which Michelangelo designing its companion piece, the Battle of Cassina. In 1506, Leonardo was summoned to Milan by Charles d'Ambroise, the acting French governor of the city. There, he took on another pupil, Count Francisco Melzi, son of a Lombard aristocrat who is considered to have been his favorite student. The Council of Florence wished that he would return promptly to finish the Battle of Anghiari, but then he was given a leave on the behest of Louis XII, who was like, let's make this Leonardo guy paint some portraits. So, he may have commenced a project for an equestrian figure of d'Ambroise. A wax medal survives, and only genuine is the only example of Leonardo's sculpture that is here. Leonardo was otherwise free to pursue his scientific interests. So let's get now to the second Milanese period. So for 5 years he was back in Milan, living in his own house in the Porta Orientale in the parish of Santa Babita. Here, in the Porta Orientale in the parish of Santa Babita, he was working on plans for an equestrian monument of Gian Giacomo Treviso, but the Swiss invaded. Yes, the Swiss invaded, so the most unlikely things happened. In the March of 1513, Lorenzo de' Medici's son Giovanni assumed the papacy as Leo X, and Leonardo went to Rome that September, where he was received by Pope Leo X's brother Giuliano. So for 3 years now, he was living in the Belvedere courtyard in the Apostolic Palace, where Michelangelo and Raphael were both active. He was given 33 ducats a month, and according to Vasari, decorated a lizard with scales dipped in quicksilver. My god, that's disgusting. The Pope gave him a painting commission of unknown subject matter, but then he cancelled it because, of course, Leonardo wanted to develop a new kind of varnish. Then he became ill. Then he had a stroke. Then he became a botanist in the gardens of Vatican City and was commissioned to make plans for the Pope's proposed drawing of the Porcine Marshes. He also visited cadavers. Yes, cadavers. Making notes for a treatise on vocal cords. Like, this is how he was. He was commissioned to make a drawing. He set out creating a new varnish. Then he became a botanist, and now he was dissecting cadavers to making a note on vocal cords. In October 1515, King Francis I of France recaptured Milan. Leonardo was present at the 19 December meeting of Francis I and Leo X, which took place in Bologna. He entered France's service, being given the use of the manor house close to Lucé, near the king's residence at the royal Chateau d'Amboise. Because he was visited by Francis, he drew plans for an immense castle town the king intended to erect at Romontari. Immense castle town with more, emphasis, and made a mechanical lion. Some of the things he does is downright hilarious, which during a pageant walked towards the king, and upon being struck by a van, opened its shells just to reveal a cluster of lilies. Leonardo was accompanied during this time by his friend and apprentice Francesco Melzi and supported by a pension of 10,000 scudi. At some point, Melzi drew a portrait of Leonardo. The only others from his lifetime were sketched by an unknown assistant on the back of one of his studies, a drawing by Giovanni Ambrogio Finio. Let's talk about his death. He died at the Clos Lucé on the 2nd of May 1519 at the age of 67. Francis I had become a close friend. Vasari describes Leonardo as lamenting on his deathbed, full of repentance that he had offended against God and men by failing to practice his art as he should have done. He states that in his last days, Leonardo sent for a priest to make his confession and to really receive the Holy Sacrament. Vasari also recorded that the king held Leonardo's head in the arms as he died, although this story might be legend rather than fact. In accordance with will, 60 beggars carrying tapers followed Leonardo's casket. Mazin was the principal heir and executor, receiving as well as money, Leonardo's paintings, tools, library, and personal effects. His other longtime pupil and companion, Salai, and his servant Baptiste of Villanée, each received half of Leonardo's vineyards. Brothers received land, and his serving women receiving land gold. On the 12th of August 1519, Leonardo's remains were interred in the collegiate church of Saint Florentine at the Château d'Amboise. Salai or is Sanayono, the little unclean one, or the devil, and sets Leonardo's household as an attestant. Certainly he was a thief, a liar, a stubborn and a glutton, he said, but he had made off with many things. Nevertheless, he treated him with a lot of indulgence and executed a lot of painting. Salai owned the Mona Lisa, and his will it was assessed at 505 lire, an exceptionally high valuation for a small panel portrait. And so was his life. However, this was his broad biography. This is the greatest, the biggest video of 52 weeks, 52 scientists ever. So we are not stopping here. Before we get to his personal life, let's talk about his paintings. And then we will get to his draftsmanship, we will get to his science and a lot of things. So despite his recent fame, for 400 years his fame was as a painter. He was being described as a divine painter in his lifetime. His work include Baptisme de Christ, or Baptism of Christ, Annunciations to Saint Jerome in the Wilderness, Adoration of the Magi, Vision of the Rocks, Lady with an Ermine, The Last Supper, in the convent of Santa Maria del Grazie, Matteo Bandello, and Mona Lisa, Saloni di Cinquecento, and that Virgin and Child with Saint Anne. These are all his drawings. So we are done with his paintings. Let's talk about his drawings, then journals and science. A lot of things are left. He was a prolific draftsman, keeping journals full of small sketches and detailed drawings, and his works can be identified as preparatory, such as the Adoration of the Magi, the Virgin of the Rocks, and the Last Supper. Among his famous drawings are the Vitruvian Man, a study of the proportions of the human body, the head of an angel, for the Virgin of the Rocks in the Loire, and a botanical study of the Star of Bethlehem, and a large drawing in black chalk on colored paper of the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne and Saint John the Baptist, which can be found in the National Gallery in London. Of course, if I'm talking about any chapel or church or museum where these drawings are, indirectly consider it as if you live there or if you live near there, go and visit those places, because I highly recommend any of the scientists I've covered. If you find any work, anything they did, and it's in a museum, please do visit that. I think this helps keep the museums afloat, number one. And the number two thing that happens after that is that it makes our respect for that scientist renewed. Anyways, so many drawings. Let's talk about his journals and notes. They recognize the Renaissance humanism recognized no mutually exclusive polarities between the sciences or the arts. Science and arts were like this equatorial place rather than being two poles, right? And these studies were recorded in 13,000 pages of notes and drawings, which use art and natural philosophy. They were made and maintained daily through Leonardo's life and travels as he made continual observations of the world around him. These notebooks, originally loose papers of different types and sizes, were largely entrusted to Leonardo's pupil and her Francesco Melzi. Let's talk about his science and invention. The rhombicubooctahedron, that's what he drew. His approach to science was observational rather than reading. He tried to understand a phenomenon by describing and depicting it, and since he didn't know Latin and mathematics, his contemporary scholars didn't thought he was a scientist. They thought he was just someone. However, his keen observations were noted, and he learned Latin. So he said, "Il sole non si muove." The sun does not move. In the 1490s, he studied mathematics under Luca Pacioli and prepared a series of drawings of regular solids in a skeletal form to be engraved as plates for Pacioli's book Divina Proportione. He has written on paleontology. He published a treatise on painting. With Leonardo's experimentation followed scientific methods, a recent and exhaustive study. He was fundamentally different from Galileo and Newton. He was as a Renaissance man. He staring and hypothesizing, integrated the arts and painting into science. He did anatomy, he dissected human corpses at the hospital of the new Saint Mary in Florence with the doctor Marcantonio della Torre, and here he talked about anatomy, the human skeleton, the mechanical functions, a lot of things. Leonardo also thought and figured out what were the effects of age and emotion on the physiology, drawing the effects of rage, and this was what made him different. He tried to observe everything with a view of someone else. He was valued as an engineer as well. He did a lot of things. He made musical instruments, a mechanical knight, a steam cannon, hydraulic pumps, reversible crank mechanism, and motor shells. He actually made some designs for an thrower and a rotor, and a documentary titled Leonardo's Dream Machines made these drawings on Channel 4 in Britain. He has got 100 inventions, revealed older prototypes, and in his notebooks he stated the laws of sliding friction. His inspiration for investigation fiction came in part from the study of perpetual motion. Let's talk about his legacy before personal life, before we get to his legacy, and we get to the part where I talk about 52 Weeks, 52 Scientists itself. Right? Because I know you guys are waiting for that, and I should probably have gotten to that. Anyways, personal life. Despite the thousands of pages Leonardo left in notebooks and manuscripts, he never wrote about his personal life. He had great physical beauty and infinite grace. He was probably vegetarian. He purchased cage birds and released them. And he had one friend. He has been satired a lot. Right? Now, let's get to his legacy. Although he had no formal academic training, many historians and scholars regard him as a prime exemplar of the universal genius, an individual of unquenchable curiosity and feverishly inventive imagination. He is widely considered one of the most diversely talented individuals to have ever lived. His fame within his own lifetime was such that the King of France carried him away like a trophy. The continued admiration that he got from painters, critics, and historians is written in many tributes. Baldassare Castiglione, author of Il Cortigiano, the courtier, wrote, In a normal course of events, many men and women are born with remarkable talents, but occasionally in a way that transcends nature. A single person is marvelously endowed by human heaven with beauty, grace, and talent in such abundance that he leaves other men far behind. Everyone acknowledged that this was true of Leonardo da Vinci, an artist of outstanding physical beauty who displayed infinite grace in everything he did. The 19th century brought a particular admiration by his genius. Henry Fusel wrote in 1801, "Such was the tone of modern art, when Leonardo da Vinci broke forth with a splendor that distanced former excellence, made up of all the elements that constitute the essence of genius." There are so many quotes. I want to read all of those. A.E. Rio says he towered above all the other authors through the strength and ability of his talents. Hippolyte Taine wrote, "There may not be in this world an example of another genius so universal, so incapable of fulfillment, so full of yearning for the infinite, so naturally refined, so far ahead of his own century and the following centuries." Bernard Berenson wrote, "Leonardo is the one artist of whom it would be said with perfect literalness, nothing that he touched but turned into a thing of eternal beauty, whether it be the cross section of a skull, the structure of a weed, or study of the muscles. He, with his feeling for line and for light and shade, forever transmitted it into life communicating values." The interest in his life has continued unabated. Leonardo Bartolin wrote, writing in 1967, said, "Because of his multiplicity of interests that spurred him to pursue every field of knowledge." Walter Isaacson wrote his uh, biography on Leonardo da Vinci. On the 500th anniversary of Leonardo's death, the Louvre in Paris arranged for the largest single exhibit of his work called Leonardo from 2019 to 2020. The exhibits included over 100 paintings, drawings, and notebooks. 11 of the paintings that Leonardo completed in his lifetime were included. 5 of these owned by the Louvre, but Mona Lisa was not included because it is in such great demand among general visitors to the Louvre. The Mona Lisa was his magnum opus, the most famous portrait ever made, more than a decade. And that, my friends, is Leonardo da Vinci. With much sadness, I have to bid you goodbye. It's not goodbye yet. There's a few minutes left in this video. So I want to spend them talking to you, the viewer. Once again, I'm very grateful for all the love, affection I've received, the subscribers, the views, the comments. They're all very close to my heart. And I'm incredibly thankful to the Almighty for giving me this opportunity and for you to appreciate what I've did and let me do this for a whole year. The last year or so since I've started this and I end the first season, it's been crazy. Crazier things have happened than in fiction. So I can say with pride that this is one of the most successful things I've ever done. And I hope I can return to you. I hope I can make more content. And it will be very sad to say goodbye to you. I'm not saying goodbye forever, I'll be back in like a few years, I mean a few months time, but still it's very hard to say goodbye to a project that I've been so devoted to, thousands of hours I've given to. So with all that in mind, I think this is it. We have to bid adieu. We have to say goodbye. So make sure to like, subscribe, to all of that. Click the bell icon, and we've got 2 lives lined up. But for one final time, this is Salomon, and I'm going to say to you goodbye.